Well, hello everyone. Thank you for listening to yet another episode of Real and Raw. And today we have Rachel Walker. Hello, Rachel. How are you doing today?
Hi, Franca. I'm great, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well. I'm ready for hibernation as the
Yeah.
Christmas period is coming up. So,
I must admit, I had a call this morning at 9 and they cancelled 2 minutes before. And I was
oh,
like, yes, I can, because I'm just at that point of the year where getting up is hard. Once I'm going, not too bad, but sluggish. Sluggish.
yeah, sluggish is, yeah, I feel that's the word of the month as well for me. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm ready to kind of just like start easing in. I have one more real and raw next week, and then we are off until after the New Year. So I'm really looking forward to slowing down and then stopping actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess we're here to talk more about relationships today, but it's interesting because on the topic of expectations, I used to get quite depressed this time of year, and I always thought it was like seasonal affective disorder.
hmm
And I think there's an extent of that, but once I shifted my expectations and just said to myself, you do less this time of year, I started feeling a lot better because it was the internal like judgment that made me really feel really rubbish.
Mm.
So yeah, it's an interesting, that's been a learning curve.
Oh wow. Um,
Yeah.
and okay, so what was your kind of overall learning curve with expectations and rather how did you end up doing what you're doing now, which is helping others manage and learn and talk about freely about expectations in relationships?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I'll try and give you the sort of postage stamp version because I'll tell you my life story. But I guess the, seeing as we're in a real and raw conversation, I'll give you the full unfiltered version, which is 2018. I just bought a flat with my boyfriend. We'd been together for 6 years, and um, I'm still am, but I was very into like self-help, self-development. I was always like onto the next thing. How can I be better? How can I be bigger? How can I do it X, Y, Z?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I actually got really close to somebody and ended up having feelings for someone else. And I went into this whole like spiral of just like, whoa, what the hell is wrong with me? Like I thought I had this vision for my life. I thought this was the right person. There's nothing wrong in my relationship. Well, at first I was in a potent state of denial because that yeah, it's easy. It's amazing how much your mind can trick you to just pretend there isn't a problem. But
Mm.
yeah, so when I confronted that, I went to see a therapist, and that was kind of like the big shift for me, which was realizing. I mean, there's loads of things, and I won't kind of reel them all off now, but realizing a lot about myself, perfectionism, what I expected of myself, the rules that I'd created for what I thought I needed to like do within a relationship to optimize its success, as if it was like a project plan.
Yeah.
Um, Not wanting to confront like negative emotions, so fear of failure was a massive thing. So that was kind of like, yeah, the big shift. And then as time went on and I kind of worked through all of that, I did the classic thing a lot of people do, which is like, oh my god, I feel so passionate about this now. I want to help other people
Mm-hmm.
work work through this same kind of doubt and insecurity and self judgment and things like that. Yeah.
Wow, like, you literally got me like on my feet the entire time of the story. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I can
Yeah.
only imagine how kind of how not necessarily. I mean, it was difficult, but just like how um, in it and on it was for you back at the time because I know how it feels like almost like you're. It feels like at least for so when I encountered a similar situation, just like in a different context, in a different setting, I felt
Mm,
like, oh my god, I have lived my entire life wrong.
yes.
And
Yeah.
that's a huge thing kind of to carry with yourself because like it feels like, oh, for the I don't know, like 10 or 15 or 20 or 25, 30 years I have been
Mhm.
doing everything I was doing completely wrong than what I was meant to be doing, and I'm kind of putting this in um, these because like as we all right or as I'm now kind of figuring out and finding out and learning is there's no kind of general right and wrong. There
Mhm.
is what feels right and wrong to you and your values and how you
Mhm.
communicate with someone else. So
Yeah.
I'm certain there's something with our preconceptions of what is normal in a relationship that has a lot to do with the expectation that we have for ourselves and equally, if not more, for our partners.
Yes. Yeah. Completely. And I think it's really it's hard to almost like forgive yourself or allow yourself grace for the fact that yourself a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago didn't know any different.
Mm,
Like I even now sometimes I have to be like I didn't have like hindsight is a fine thing, right? And so you kind of have to go, I did what I did with the information that I had at the time or the
yeah.
worldview that I had at the time.
Mm,
And I think what's interesting about relationships is like how they evolve over time and the things that we learn from each one. And I think when we're growing up, they're quite, we kind of learn that they're quite transactional. So, you know, you're kind to somebody, you're kind in return. Somebody invites you to their birthday party, you invite them in return.
yeah.
And you kind of learn that there's like these rules. But then you get to adulthood and you discover that like things kind of don't really work like that because for one, people don't always reciprocate in the way you want them to. And for two, there's kind of something about like unconditional love where you should be doing it out of love and kindness for a person, not in the expectation that you'll get something in return.
Yeah.
So it's a really weird like space to navigate and realign on what do I actually want and expect and what should I from myself and from the other person, I think.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I've never thought about it that way, but I think you're spot on with that kind of transition where we are kind of almost left to our own devices because we
Hmm.
haven't been prepared for it.
Yeah.
And thinking about it now as you were saying it, I think that's definitely a key thing for why kind of many people get lost in their relationships when they reach adulthood. 'Cause
Mm.
when I look at my context of friends, let's say all of them had really thriving relationships in high school, but they are struggling to find a partner or kind of keep a partner now because I think
Right.
they're kind of stuck in that space of what but he didn't do something for me or she did that and I expected otherwise and I was like but you, I'm trying not to get too 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 in their love life um
Specific. Yeah.
yeah and kind of offer advice when I'm not asked to offer advice but at times when I'm always trying to kind of tell them that we and that's something that I've learned. That's why I can tell them now in hindsight that we just
Yeah.
can't expect other people, whether that's our family or our partners, to behave exactly as us because everyone
Hmm.
has learned something different throughout their life and has different experiences. So if I
Yeah.
go like if I expect the same types of behaviors from my friends or from my partner, I feel it's almost selfish of me to do that because they possibly can't keep up with those expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And almost expecting like the world from one person,
Yeah,
you know, like we can't get everything from one person. And I don't think that's talked about a lot. I think, you know, I'm a sucker for a romantic movie. I love it. You know, I love all of that. But like, it's always very much like they are your world, aren't they? And it's like this
yeah,
big moment.
yeah,
Um, and it's interesting what you say about like friends and not wanting to give advice necessarily, because that was a big part of why I do this work in like a coaching context is because something I found really hard when I was in that place of doubt was whoever you speak to, as exactly as you said, has a different experience and view, and they will. If you're feeling insecure or unsure, you will be thrown from one side to the other, and you can always find an opinion that supports or like refutes
Yeah.
where you're at.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will say to me like, "Oh, Rachel, you work with people around relationships. Like you're the relationship expert. Tell me the answer to this." And I'm like, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. My expertise is helping you to understand what you want,
Yeah.
because that, in my opinion, that's what people need more than anything, because there's so much noise out there that's
Mhm.
confusing, and then we end up kind of jumping on the next thing we think we should be doing
Yeah.
and never really find that within ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think that's like, I'm not a certified coach or anything, but my approach to kind of, even if I'm asked for advice, I always respond in questions. Because
Mm,
I don't want to kind of give you the answer necessarily my opinion. I just kind of help lead them to break down their thoughts, because I can often see how they are stuck in a kind of in the same loop of questions and thinking. And
yeah,
then I try to kind of find a question that enables them to kind of break out of that cycle and go like, ah, okay. And then it's much easier to continue thinking once you're kind of out of that loop.
yes. You're a wise friend.
Thank
But
you.
I also think that's why these kind of conversations are so good, because when I first started doing coaching and I was conscious to not give an opinion or, impress my kind of view or anything like that, I was also really aware that something that people need and want is to feel like it's normal.
Yeah.
And I think having these conversations or hearing other people's stories at least lets you go, oh, okay. It kind of helps you make sense of your own situation by
Yeah.
hearing other people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. And that's one of the key reasons why unsetting expectations exist. And when I decided to kind of scale it, whereas it's not only about the topics that I'm not knowledgeable but experienced at, such as
Mm,
perfectionism and burnout and mental health in general, with high
mm,
expectations. I was like, I want to invite as many guests as possible for them to talk about what they have experienced, because I want to be normalizing like across the panel all of these topics that we feel are not normal, where in reality they are. So
yeah, yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah, and I feel like, okay, so I have a question. Let's say that um, okay, so I'm trying to construct a question in my head because I haven't done it before. So
Mm,
I have a kind of a repeated situation for me, and I think for a couple of my best friends who are in a relationship now. And the context is this: we are all kind of, yeah, really almost like junkies on self development, and we are working on ourselves. But what we find ourselves in every so often is, for like weeks or months, our relationships are almost perfect, but then it reaches a point where you feel like, where every just like that one day the shit goes down, and it's like
mhm,
you don't see it coming necessarily, because up until that moment everything was really really good. And what I have kind of tried to piece together is, I feel like that's a space and a time in the relationship with myself and in the relationship me plus someone else, where
mhm,
it's like I feel like I'm breaking out of the comfort zone that I was in that moment by that time, and then everything that was kind of perfect in that nice cloud of comfort now
mm.
now is a storm. And I'm curious whether your clients have had similar experiences, or you kind of know better what is happening actually behind the scenes.
Mm. Interesting, yeah. And is it? is it that you feel like the comfort space creates this storm within your relationship or within yourself or both?
I think that it almost feels like it starts it starts within myself, and then it's really kind of subliminal in a way that I don't necessarily it's not necessarily something that I talk about, or that I'm doing, but rather, so let's say my partner can feel like, oh, she's growing in a new way, and then subliminally, like he can get doubts whether, oh, but will he now be good for me because I'm now a step ahead,
Right.
and then that
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
just like creates a veil of fear and doubt, and like nothing happened in reality, or like uh, um, physically nothing happened, but just like
Yeah,
we wake up one day and everything feels different.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think like growth is such a like personal growth feels kind of exposing.
Mm.
And I think I had a similar feeling over the last few years where I was doing like quite a lot of intense stuff with my coach training that makes you like think about your own life.
Hmm.
And you can end up feeling, I think, a bit worried that what will this mean? Like, will it mean I might outgrow somebody? You know, and your partner might also be thinking, hang on, like they might outgrow me. Like it is, yeah, I do relate to that feeling. And I think it's hard because to an extent that's life, right? Like whether it's, well, you know, life changes and people grow. I think the difference in this situation with like self-help is like you're choosing to grow.
Mm.
And so there's an insecurity there about that choice, I think, for sometimes for partners, because they're like, hang on, am I not enough already? And often it's not about them, right? It's about
Yeah, yeah.
ourselves. But I understand that kind of doubt that it can throw up to make you kind of go like, whoa, this is disrupting the status quo.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting because actually my ex-boyfriend used to say to me, I think self-help, like he was anti self-help really. And he used to say to me, like, I don't think it's any good for you. And I'd be like, oh my God, what are you talking about? It's so miserable. But actually I think on reflection now, I look at that and I go, oh, it wasn't great for me because I was looking at it through the lens of everything that I needed to be better at and all the ways I wasn't good enough.
Hmm.
Whereas now I have a healthier relationship with self-help. I don't think it's a problem, but it was something in the relationship that was a bit of a, I remember having that very real fear, and I think he did too, that like I might outgrow you or like I'm going to wanderlust off somewhere. And actually, to be fair, that is kind of what I did. But it's hard, it's complicated, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, it's life in some respects. And I guess the question is like, to continue to feel that safety in relationship, do you want to stifle those parts of yourself? Or do you want to let those parts roam free and then just keep the communication with your partner about like how you both feel about that, I guess?
Mm. Yeah, and then those are very also vulnerable conversations to have. I don't know of many examples in my real life where people talk about these things.
Yeah.
It's usually very, very like, oh, how do you say, like on the top layer. Like we don't go often very deep down and talk about even like what has moved us, what has changed us, what has deeply impacted us. Um,
Mm.
for a lot of people, I feel like we still kind of hide or keep wary of opening ourselves to other people, because then opening ourselves means, oh, now they can hurt me, and
Yeah.
if I give them the chance, they will. And kind of, I myself, coming from a very traumatic childhood, I had a problem with that throughout my younger years. But then I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember kind of saying to myself, I can't live my life this way. And
Yeah.
the other person doesn't deserve it as well, because I keep applying my own my own baggage to them and be like, this is yours to carry now because I can't.
Uh-huh.
And I remember just like at one point I said, like, fuck it, I can't do this. Like, I will learn to be open and vulnerable to the extent that I am capable in every moment. So like, it's like in every moment I'm giving 100% of myself to the other person,
Yeah.
not because I expect something of them or the same 100% of them towards me, but because that's the best way that I can work and function in any given relationship. It's the same with my friends, it's the same with my family. And I feel like I had, yeah, and I myself had a lot of expectations around what a relationship should look like, and what I was,
Mm,
even worse, what I was taught it looked like. So
yeah.
let's say for me, I'm like my family. If I just look at my mother and father's relationship, that was deeply dysfunctional. It was very abusive. I cannot continue growing up believing that that behavior is normal, because
Mm-hmm.
for me it was. I grew up in that family, and that kind of behavior was deemed normal to me. When I
Yeah.
see, like, when I see a father laughing with his daughter, that feels very weird for me, because that's something I have never experienced. So
Mm-hmm.
I needed to do a lot of unsetting and setting expectations of, okay, what does normal look for me, but that it's
Yes.
not abusive, that it's not, like, it's not unhealthy, because I can't keep kind of carrying all of these things. So I think how we are raised and how we are later conditioned by society and the media as well, of
Mm-hmm.
what a relationship looks like, is something that almost powers what our own image of a relationship, instead of it coming from inside of us.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And I love that because I think like for you to recognize that the influence of like the relationships that you've had in the past and with family and stuff is one thing. And then to be able to go, okay, now it's my responsibility to like unset those expectations to
Yeah.
move forward. I think it's such a great thing. Um, and it's really interesting. I had like a similar thing where so my parents are divorced. And it's one of those things where like I don't really think about it as a big deal. Like it happened when I was 7 and just life. Like I don't think I've had any particular hardship in my life. But obviously it's a frame, it sets the frame of reference for how you see relationships, right? And so
Mhm.
actually when I went to therapy about my relationship doubt, that one of the things that was kind of involved in it all was I expect all relationships to fail. That is just an expectation that I have.
Wow.
And I think I should like work on that. But then what was really interesting, we didn't touch on it too much in terms of the family stuff in therapy because I was quite focused on like the present situation. But what happened a bit later was actually when I started, because when I started my business, it was originally a blog. It was called Closet Perfectionist, and it was about expectations kind of more generally.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I decided to pivot more into relationships, it was quite confronting because it was a personal situation. And I was like, no, I'm ready now to talk a bit more. But I had this moment with my like mentor coach who was trying this like tool with me where you step into like different perspectives to like challenge a belief. And I said, the belief that I have is that I expect all relationships to fail. And we were talking through it all and like getting different perspectives. And she said, can I share an observation with you? And I was like, yes. And she was like, I don't hear that you expect all relationships to fail. I hear that you expect it is your sole responsibility to make relationships work. And I was like, oh, honestly.
Wow.
And she was right because all the rules and like perfectionism I had created to myself was trying to safeguard against a relationship ending but why? Like, what
Mm,
actually why? So that's been a huge thing for me, is to get to a place where I kind of feel like some last, some don't. We have certain control over it. We also have no control over it. Like, it's letting go of the fact that uncertainty is uncomfortable
mm.
and just learning to kind of be a bit more present in relationships.
Uh, I literally got chills in my entire body when you
There's
said
a,
that
there's a
observation.
recording where she says it, and I'm like,
Oh my god. Oh wow.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Oh wow. That was a moment.
what's a moment? Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Those things, like, I guess it's like anything in life. It translates across your whole life. I'm
Yeah.
like that in work. I'm like, I always think it's my responsibility, to fix it or work it or do it or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, beyond.
It is a lot to carry, and then a lot to realize what you have been carrying. And yeah, for me, that the most important step is always realizing, but why? Like, what was it? What was it for?
Yeah. And then you have to get over the anger almost, because when you realise actually for no good reason, you're like, for fuck's sake, oh, it's all about bothering.
I have that stage like every 2 weeks because I'm like, oh, are you insane? Like, because when I look at what, but when I realize all of the things I unnecessarily have put on my shoulders, it's like, why? Again
Yeah.
and again, why? But
Yeah.
another thought that I got from what you just shared now is how that it's actually normal for us to experiment with relationships. But then again,
Mm.
that's something that's not really valued in society for women. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even if you just like look at Taylor Swift and her younger age, like I think the media was cutting her open with how often she was having new boyfriends, and then it was like that, like you're being fed an image that it's not okay to break up with
Mm-hmm.
someone every so often, and that
Mm-hmm.
what in reality we should, like, if it sucks we should we should stick with what sucks because it's
Yeah.
not, like, not socially approved to do otherwise. And
Yeah.
now in retrospect, like, I was angry then, I'm angry now.
Yeah. It really is, isn't it? When I think back to, like, when you think like, oh, I don't think there's been much sort of like sexism or, women treated in like really shit ways in my life. And then you get to an age where you think about like the things I used to see on magazine covers. Well, we still see, but when you're in an impressionable like teenage years. And the example you gave of Taylor Swift, I never used to think when I was a teenager, I never thought that was weird. And now I'm like, what? What? Like the press, yeah, absolutely tearing her apart for going through different relationships, and it's such bullshit, isn't it? It's just like the expect. Well, that's the other thing, which is the completely what's the word, like unattainable expectations, because they're completely contradictory. It's like,
Mm.
find a man, get married, but don't find too many of them. But be sexy, but don't be too sexy. Like, it's just such rubbish.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got to sort of make sense of that for yourself, haven't you? Because it's yeah, it's a minefield.
it is, because like at the same time, um I I always hate when it comes to numbers, like how many boyfriend partners you had, how many partners you had intimate relationship with, how many partners, like all of the how many, or like when you're in a relationship, how many times a week do you have sex, like, or do you even have, like, all of
Right.
all of these how many are mind-boggling for me, because I'm like, there's not a, like, a generally accepted number for how many that can work. Like, it's not a formula for fuck's sake. Like, everyone
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
relationship
totally.
is different and every individual is different, because like even now when I look in retrospect, each of my relationships that I had, whether they were long term or short term, I have learned something about myself from them. Like some, yeah,
Completely.
like some were really nice, some were really horrible and toxic, but that's like I have always learned something, and I have now I'm kind of a smarter person or like a more experienced person because of those. And
Hmm.
for me, kind of to be expected, yeah, to like, oh, I finished, I'm graduating uni now, I should be getting engaged, getting married, and having a kid. I was like, but
Yeah.
that doesn't like it doesn't align with my values. I appreciate that
Yeah.
it aligns with your values, but let's not like you can't impose those on me, right?
Hmm. Yeah, completely. And I think people like not only like the numbers, but then people like to sort of throw their 2 cents in about what amount of time you have to have been with someone for it to be like an acceptable level of like being upset, or like how old you were. So
Mm,
I had quite a few like 2 3 month relationships when I was 14, 15, and numerous people have said to me like, oh, I don't know why you count those in your boyfriend count, like you were a teenager. And I'm like, for one, you are not me, so you don't know how I feel. For two, those were some of my most significant learnings about how to navigate relationships.
mm,
They were all a stepping stone in me being able to like for at first being a total pushover and taking like shit, and not sticking up for myself, and then learning and stuff. And I just think like I have a real thing about teenagers now growing up and having relationships, and people like belittling it as if it's not significant. Oh, they're young, they don't know what love is. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure they've got a lot to learn, as we all have, but there's a feeling there, and there's a lot to take from it. So don't
yeah.
underestimate that.
Oh, 100%. And I so relate with that. I've never had, I don't remember ever having a conversation around that, but that's something that I will definitely do on my next coffee, whether someone counts their teenage, the teenage partners into account. Because yeah, you're so right. And I can say the same. Those, yeah, pretty much short term now when I'm looking at long term is my 7 year relationship, then those were short term relationships. And then um
Yeah.
they were like kind of stepping stones, and where you're because of almost like for that's when for the first time ever you are experiencing a relationship that doesn't involve you and your family but still involves love in a very
Mm,
private manner. Like with friends, it's a bit different. You love them, but it's not the necessarily the same amount of love and affection and passion that you feel for someone. And
yeah.
that means that like when we are 13, 14, 15, 18, whatever the age, is like that's when for the first time ever we are almost yeah, trying to define what is our role and where do we stand in this
Mm,
entirely new type of relationship, right?
yeah,
And yeah,
exactly.
and for someone else to dismiss it, I also think like it's I I dislike dismissal in general, and I
Yeah.
dislike dismissal in situations like these because yeah, people don't give it as much as just like same value because
Mm,
um especially now the younger generations like they have a completely, I think, different way of approaching and thinking about love and relationships, much more open, I'd say, than
yeah.
when I was younger. So I would really like to, yeah, just like provide, like facilitate a space, like an environment where it's like we are not dismissing that. Like people often shame experimenting, whether that's experimenting with different kind of partners or being in a like, different kinds of relationships or more relationships. It's like like everyone is wired in a different way, and I almost do of course taking into account that it's not something that kind of facilitates very toxic behavior, then that tends to become an issue. I just want to kind of pronounce that. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's really actually memorable of young people being so open and courageous to do that because
Mm.
it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And I think it blows my mind that like, so I had a conversation with someone about ethically non-monogamous relationships,
Hmm.
and we were talking about like the kind of taboo around that, both from like a structural like legal system perspective, but also just people's opinions. And I just feel like maybe it's just me, but I just feel like why should anybody give that much of a shit about somebody else's choices? Do you know what I mean? It's like, what
Yeah,
is it to you if somebody decides that their preference in whatever way, shape, or form? It honestly blows my mind.
yeah,
Just feel like do whatever you want. Come on, guys.
yeah, yeah.
Oh.
I am marching right next to you on that one. um,
Yeah.
and so, what kind of advice do you have for, um, if you have any, for managing those kinds of conversations, right? So I can say that we are now 7 years, almost 7 years into our relationship, and I'm not like neither of us is really on the train that we need to get married because that's what society expects of us. But then
Yeah.
there's my parents and my grandparents and his parents, and he like everyone expects something: a marriage, a child, a grandchild, like things like that, right? So how do we keep our relationship almost like safe, or rather our choices our own and safe when communicating with other people?
Yeah, and that's a tough one, right? Because I
Mm,
think like you're always going to have people that will have an opinion,
yeah.
um, and I've definitely felt that with family who will be like, "Oh, you're 29 now," da, 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 da. And I'm like, I tend to get anger as the emotion that comes up for me. I think in previous years I would have felt like, "Oh no, am I doing something wrong?" Whereas now I'm like, "How dare you judge my life choices?"
Yeah.
And I think there's a process of like getting to a place where you feel confident in yourself that like that is what you want or don't want, um and there's nothing. And I think, yeah, feeling secure in that in yourself is like a really important step, because it's easier, I think, to withstand other people's judgment and questions if you're like, no, I know this is right for me, so you can say whatever you like. And the same with being on the same page in your relationship. If you've discussed it and you know that you're both on the same page, and then I think it's kind of having a bit of compassion for the fact that everybody has their own reference point.
Mm,
So they will bring to the table their own bias, right? And frame on the world, and they won't really know any different. And it's just, I think, allowing for that a little bit. And it's like, look, that's your thing, but it's not for us. Um, and yeah, I guess that's more about reaction than kind of how you feel about your choices. But yeah, I think it's making sure you feel secure in yourself and in your relationship about what you expect from each other, or want or don't want. And then just being aware that other people are going to say stuff and ask questions, and that's kind of on them.
yeah, that's really useful because like when I think I'm the same now, where I was like before I was re-questioning myself, whereas now I'm like, how dare you give me advice when I didn't ask for it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's because I'm in that space at the moment and I'm trying to do the next bit, but I think the next level is feeling neutral about it, which
Yeah.
is like, okay,
Mhm.
that's your opinion, but I know what I want, so
Yeah. Yeah.
on your way.
Yeah. On your way. Yeah. 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 I'm always having this kind of internal battle inside of me where I don't want to keep my mouth shut because then I enable them to continue speaking their opinion without me actually standing up for myself. But I am not at the
Yeah.
point to stand up for myself without getting really pissed.
Yes. Yeah. I think part of it is choosing the battles that you want to fight
Mm.
when you feel like you're ready. Yeah, ready to fight them in like calm and constructive manner.
Yeah.
Um, so like and to be fair, no one in my family is particularly like this. There's a few classic sort of questions or implications, but they're not too bad. But like my gran, for example, who's nearly 90, that's not a battle that I want to fight because she's stuck in her ways. She's me explaining why I've made a choice to not get married yet, for example. I just don't think it's worth it. Whereas other family members, like parents or things like that, I feel like you can plant a seed and have a bit more of like an adult conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a judgment as to who's worth being that honest with, and who's worth just going like, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like as we are approaching holidays, this is a very useful piece of advice for anyone
That's a very
listening.
yeah.
um,
But you know what? I remembered the other day that a boyfriend I had in high school was probably 16, 17 at the time. And I used to go around to his, and his dad, I remember I think it was his auntie or something who was married but didn't have kids. His dad used to constantly be like, when are you having kids? Come on, when are you popping some kids out? When are you going to have, blah, blah, blah. Like on their case. And at the time, I was just like, oh, yeah. And now it just makes me so angry. And I know times have changed a lot, but I just think like that kind of, I think children in particular, the expectation from other people particularly pisses me off because that is a very big choice, and it's a choice that some people either don't want to make or there's reasons why they can't. And I just think people should keep their noses out for that one.
yeah.
Excuse me.
All good.
But that's not how the world used to be, is it? Right? So there's a lot of I think every generation is fighting the bullshit from the previous generation, and
Yeah.
our ancestors or grandchildren or people of the future will probably be thinking it of us. So
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same with my grandparents, unless they are so kind of, if they are bugging me so much, then what I love to do, and like, sorry, grandma, I know she doesn't speak English, but I still have to say sorry because it's really joyful for me to do that sometimes. Like she gets on with her arguments on why I should have kids sooner rather than later, and in general why I should instead of shouldn't. And then what I tend to do if she's really in the mood, I almost I fuck her logic up in a way that I bring her. So she starts with one argument, and then I make her come to a counter argument of her argument by the end of it.
oh, I like this. This is
Yeah,
smart.
and then she's like, "Ah, you're impossible. Leave me alone." I was like, "Okay, I got that out. Then she doesn't bug me for a while because I'm trying to prove to her that all of the arguments she's saying are almost like completely irrational and don't make sense for me. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way I can do that is to show to her, like, if she started with one point, I completely bring her around the circle and she finishes with the counter argument of what she was saying in the first place. And then
She's like, how did you get here? I'm fighting against myself. Oh,
because that technically that's what it is, right? Usually um they're not necessarily fighting against us. I feel like they are fighting against themselves and what they have been taught and learned.
completely. Yeah,
So,
completely.
and it's almost, sometimes it almost feels like I had to suffer so you need to, in a way, like,
Yeah.
how dare you make your own choices and do whatever you want, because look at all of the shit that I had to go through and you need to go to at least some of them.
Yes. The one that me and my gran have disagreed on is like, I don't understand why women are always hiring cleaners. Why are you not cleaning your own home? Or like, so and so has a child and drops them off really early in the morning to go to breakfast club at school. I don't understand why they're not feeding their own children. And I do have to bite my tongue because I'm like, I know
Mm,
that's just your reference on the world, but please get
yeah,
updated.
yeah, that's so true. I mean, like, maybe a year ago I also like I love to clean. Cleaning and organizing it clears my brain, but I am very
Mm.
clinical about cleaning. And when
Mm-hmm.
I have a busy period at work or a busy period with uni, I can't afford myself the time to keep my house clinically clean all the time because I like that's just not my priority.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a year ago or maybe a bit less, where I got a cleaner that comes every 2 weeks and helps me do like a general cleaning. Most often than not, I usually clean with her because I love to clean. But like she
Mm-hmm.
literally saves me on times when I can't, or like when I'm literally not spending any time in the house, because
Yeah.
that when I come home to a nice and clean space, when where I don't have like that silent to do list, or the dishes are waiting for you, or you haven't cleaned the toilet in forever, and
Yeah.
like that just like takes off so much pressure from me,
Mhm.
and I feel like yeah, being like I don't feel like I am a lesser a woman or lesser a wife slash partner because of it, or lesser a like home owner, home habitant, whatever it is. Just like
Yes.
that only goes to the point that I made sure to keep my home clean, even though I can't. Like, but I it must be I'm earning enough money to be able to afford that someone else comes and helps me.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of
Mm-hmm.
all of these things around, yeah, cleaning
Yeah.
or feeding children, or even like I think it was last Monday, or maybe I think it was last Monday. I had a day completely for myself. So it was like I had I went to psychotherapy, then for a massage, then I went to hairdressers to color my hair, and then
Oh,
then I went on a dinner with a friend, and then I had a manicure. And
amazing.
yeah, and my nan called me that when I was on having dinner, and her main comment was, "Oh, you left your partner all alone this entire day."
No way.
I was like, "Yeah, he can handle it, but what is he doing? I don't know, like living on the car. I don't care. But will you be
Yeah.
coming home now? No, I will be out for like another 3 or 4 hours. Oh, but who will make him dinner?" And it was like for me it was a very comical conversation because
Yeah.
it felt like my partner cannot live and function without me, which is very unhealthy. And like it just goes on to prove kind of the types of relationships that my grandparents have. Probably everyone in their generations, like you live to serve another man
Yeah.
that lives in your
Yeah.
house. And
Yeah.
now I am not living to serve my man who lives in the house. It's like, oh, what? How dare you? Like, how can you do that? And I just think that being able to, yeah, have a day for yourself and not feel guilty about it is
Yes.
something every woman should strive for in a relationship.
Definitely. And it seems so foreign to us now, I think, that like that would seem weird to your gran, right? It's like, wow, that's how people used to live their lives.
Yeah,
Um, and I think there's another thing with that when you were talking about like getting help with cleaning and stuff, is like being really honest with ourselves about what do I have bandwidth for and what am I just not good at, and just being fine with that.
yeah,
Like I think before I realized how high my expectations of myself were, I was always like, oh, I need to be better at baking because I'm not very good at that, or like I just need to be cleaner, all of these things. And now I'm just like, I don't like baking. I don't like anything with a level of like surgical precision. I'm too chaotic for that. And that's, you know what, and that's fine. So I will just buy a cake.
yeah,
Or like, yeah, with the cleaning and stuff, I actually really enjoy doing it, but I'm lazy. So I struggle to get into the routine of it. And I just accept that now. And it's quite freeing to just recognize what we're good at and what we're not. And the same in our relationships, right? Like our partner can do other things that their strengths are.
yeah,
We don't need to walk around pretending like we've got all of our shit together because It's just not real.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's 100% true. It's like
Mm.
I hate doing the I hate feeding sheets on the bed. Like it sounds
Oh
so
yeah.
random. I hate it from the bottom of my soul, but my partner loves doing that. And but he doesn't like cleaning the windows, so I will clean the windows because I love cleaning
Mhm.
us. It's like
Yeah,
we just
exactly.
yeah, we just kind of figuring out who has yeah, not only the bandwidth but strength in certain areas. And sometimes if we can be, let's say, cooking, we are both passionate for cooking. And in the
Hmm.
beginning I embrace chaos in my own life as well. So my cooking in general is never following a recipe and doing it like very robotic and machinery. It's like
Yeah.
I take a look around the house and be like, okay, so what do I have in the house and what can I make with it? And it can be
Hmm.
something completely random. Whereas when my partner started cooking, he was very meticulous, followed everything to the T, every recipe. Like if it was like 3.25 grams, and it was 3.25 grams, and not like not 324, nor 326, 325. Whereas throughout our relationship and us living together, when he saw me being what seems like chaotic, but is actually kind of creative in the kitchen, he also kind of loosened up and he started embracing his feelings that he knows on his own. Oh, I don't know. Feta cheese will go nicely with this, even though it's not in the recipe. But
Uh-huh.
kind of looking me being playful and creative in the kitchen enabled him or kind of made him safe to be the same. And
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think how it will be really nice to kind of apply that in every facet of the relationship, because instead of being um almost like when so in the same scenario but in another context, he could be, how could you do that, you have no idea what you are doing, blah 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 blah. Like he
Yeah.
yeah, he can completely kind of dismiss my way of doing things and
Hmm.
be like, oh, but that's wrong because you're not following the recipe. But actually what happens is what I've described earlier, which is like it is weird for him, but he sees me and at the end of the day he eats the food and sees that it's tasty. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I do have a higher failure ratio than his because I take lots of more risk. But
Yes.
the meals that I make are like extraordinarily creative and very tasty, 3 out of 5 times or 4 out of 5, and then the 1 out of 5 is like, oh my god, this just like I wouldn't give this to a dog. It just sometimes happens, and I learned to embrace it, and it was really interesting for me to see how he embraced it as well. But I think we
Mhm.
need to adopt that kind of, I don't know even how to name that feeling, like
Is it a sort of
mm,
like freedom of like go with the flow sort of spirit?
yeah, it almost like, for me it is go with the flow and let's see what happens. But then for the other person, so they need to have enough trust in me that I won't fuck it up just because it's something different that they haven't seen necessarily before. Because I think
God, yeah.
when someone when we experience when we see someone doing something that we have never seen before, that's like really unconventional, then we think,
Hmm.
oh my god, look at what they are doing, they're going to fuck something up. Because
Yeah.
just statistically looking, they have never seen that approach before. So naturally, the first thing that will rise up is like, that's completely wrong. And
Hmm.
I think it takes a certain amount of trust and maturity to be like, I trust them with what they are doing. Because instead of comparing that approach with the rest of the society, they are like, okay, so in this context, my partner can be, okay, Franca is doing unconventional shit every fucking day. So, if I compare how she's preparing dinner now based on how she's, how she does everything in her life, then I
Mm,
can find the trust to put in her because I know she won't fuck it up, or like the chances are really slim.
yeah. It's kind of letting go of that control, I think, isn't it? In the way that
Yes.
we
Oh,
know, yeah, we know how to do things. And I think you confront that a lot when you live with someone and you realize the little that you both have and the things that you do, and you kind of have to choose which are the things that, like, no, I will continue to do this my way,
yeah.
and which are the things you're like, compromise, or, oh, actually, you do it better than me, so I'll give that a go. But yeah, it's interesting what that kind of throws up.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It is. Yeah. So you've nitpicked it nicely. It is losing, letting go of control, and that's something that I remember I was afraid the most because having lived an almost like very unstable, uncertain life, I liked being in control, or rather, at least thinking that I have things under
Yeah.
control, because that's what made me safe. I thought that if I let go, then everything will come down crumbling.
Yeah.
And being in control all of the time, especially in a relationship where there's like almost double the effort because you're not only keeping control of yourself, but you're also trying to keep the other person and their behaviors under control, which is really hard,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and also unattainable and selfish. Um, it's it becomes really overwhelming, and then with times, like as I say, like I really appreciate order and cleanliness, and um, I like sometimes I can get irritated over, oh, look, like where did he leave his socks again? How many times have I blah 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 blah? I'm like, it just takes me like 3 fucking seconds to pick them up and put them instead of
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of rewire myself in a way that for things that are literally take less than 5 seconds for me, and that instead of feeling resentful and getting angry and like in inputting drama into my relationship, I'll be like, it just takes me of like less than 5 seconds to do this, and then if it
Yeah.
repeats or if it buggles or if it bothers me for a while, then I won't react that same time, like at that moment where I'm like, oh fuck, like when I'm full of anger,
Yeah.
I'll be like,
Use the
okay,
like.
yeah, but I'll be like, okay,
Yeah.
so when we are both like very when we both ate so that we don't so that we're not hungry, and I'll be like, listen, babe, this really bothers me. Can you please blah 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 blah? And I'm like kind of continually learning to not not self-impose resentment and drama into my relationship if I don't
Mhm.
necessarily need to. And that's that a lot of it comes from letting go of control
Yeah.
and
And
expectations.
exactly, yeah. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things. You know, we were saying earlier about people losing themselves in their relationships. And I
Mm,
think quite often people do that because they're trying to hold on to a sense of controlling either like the outcome or the perception of themselves as likable, or, you know, similar things, or not controversial. And also with vulnerability, like I remember when I first got with my boyfriend now, there are a few things, you know, at the start of a relationship where like you're trying to get a feel for each other's expectations and what you're happy with or not. And there was a couple of times where I didn't say something when I wanted to, and he said to me, and then but then what happens is you stew on it, don't you? And then it comes out. And he
yeah.
said to me, like, you just need to tell me, like, it's fine. I'm trying to gauge it. And I remember saying, like, if I ask for what I want, it opens up the opportunity for me to be disappointed. And I hate that feeling.
Mm,
And that's that loss of control, because you don't want to feel vulnerable and insecure and, yeah, risk disappointment. But then you also miss out on all the joy, don't you, if you don't let go of that tightly held sort of self protection.
yeah. Oh, that's yeah. Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
But those kinds of things, even just saying them out loud,
Mm,
it releases you from them to an extent, right?
yes. Yeah. 100%. I was. So when you mentioned, when you just like started talking about losing yourself in a relationship, I was thinking of following up with a question: how to navigate when you know what you stand for in a relationship, but then that often can pose not necessarily a problem, but rather like a fear from the other
Mm.
person, because if we know what we stand for, then like it's really, it can be sometimes overwhelming or and overpowering for the other person if they don't know what they stand for, in a
Mm.
way. But then like as you continued to speak about it, I was like, but it's actually the same thing in a way. Like, if I know what I want, um, if I'm very firm at it, it also means that I will be very, like, almost like in the army, expecting things that are like, if I tell you my list, then I expect every single one to be checked by the end of the, I don't know, day, week, month, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that dynamic, like even though let's say now I don't do that, but it is the most general experience of other people, in a way. So even though I don't do that, my partner is almost like conditioned to be like, oh, but I need to fulfill every single requirement in order for her to be happy, right?
Right. Yes. Again, it's like that checklist of like control or like safeguarding against the future or things like that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And it reminded me of when we just started, when me and my partner started dating. I'm really, by that point I was really already really relaxed and chill. Like when I say it's okay, I truly 100% mean it's okay. Like I'm not being passive aggressive. I'm not holding anything up. But for him, that was kind of hard to accept, because probably his experience by that point was opposite, to when someone would say I'm okay. It was like I'm okay, like very very unhealthy I'm okay. And i I remember having to constantly reassure him that like, no, for real, it's like everything's fine, it's chill, like I don't have a problem with this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was I was already at that point where I knew my values, I knew what I want, I knew what I don't want, for the most part. Like I'm still figuring out some things, but like I'd say for like 80% of my core values, I'm certain of.
Yeah.
And it just comes across as very uh, weird to other people, because it feels like generally the majority of the people are either lost or kind of putting masks on in their relationships, so they seem different than what they are. Whereas like
Yeah.
I'm an open book with you now, and with every other my relationship type is like, you can ask me everything, and I don't have like nothing stops me from saying anything that you
Mm-hmm.
ask me of. And then that's really
Mm-hmm.
a different kind of a relationship to be in, because before you had to literally kind of figure out what the other person was thinking, and then
Yeah.
what they wanted to say or what they meant to say. Like it was a lot of those dualities and subconscious, like, oh, you need to know what I wanted you to do. It's like, no, I will tell you what I need you to do. Like, if I need a hug,
Yeah.
I'll say like I need a hug. I won't be like winking or something and expecting you to pick up on the wink and be like, oh, she needs a hug. Like, no, I'm very literal.
Well, yeah, and if we're not explicit, then we just end up making up stories in our heads on what we think the other person wants. That's definitely what I did in my last relationship. I have all these stories about what I thought his expectations of me were, and I think probably none of it's true. But I didn't
Mm,
know otherwise, so it was just like this whole reality in my head. Um, but I think what's tricky, like when you were explaining then about being quite sure of yourself and having expectations, is I think there can be a bit of a misconception that it's like you go into a relationship and go, these are the things that I expect because now I know what my expectations are. You will do this, 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 and this. And I do struggle a little bit with some of the Instagram, like, know your worth, say what you want, ask for it, don't be afraid. Because I think it loses a little bit of the fact that it is a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And I think knowing what your expectations are is much more about being able to communicate them and have a conversation about them than like laying down the law.
Yeah.
In my experience of like helping people with this, I tend to find that the kinds of people that I work with are, it's not like they completely overestimate what they expect. They just struggle to feel confident in themselves that like it's okay to want XYZ and it's okay to tell other people or, like to shake off things like marriage or wanting kids and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just want to be able to like sit in the vulnerability of saying them out loud.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big part of it.
Yeah, I think that is kind of brought up by us not discussing openly as much, basically all of the things that we spent the last 60 minutes discussing.
Yeah.
Because it makes you feel weird because like if you're not seeing examples of it often outside, then like it makes you doubt that something's wrong in the way that you are thinking about it, and it goes like
Completely.
and that kind of that shows up in a lot of different areas as well, like if like female owners of creative small businesses, like in Croatia it's 2%. So if I want to do a small creative business, like I have such a small pool of examples of people who are doing it, and
Yeah.
because of that, like you immediately get a picture and a nudge that maybe it's not safe to do that, maybe it's wrong to do that because not 50+% of people are doing that.
Yeah.
And I just feel like instead of I feel like it always comes down to, instead of looking outwards and searching for external cues and numbers to compare yourself with, I think we just like kind of need to kind of shut those doors and look inwards and be like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to figure out what my own principles are and trust that if I stick with my principles and my values, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And I think this, like, talking about cheating for me has been a big kind of shift in terms of being secure in my own expectations, because like my parents split up because of an affair, and I've always had this really uncomfortable tension, which is I don't fundamentally believe that people can be together forever. And no, I guess I fundamentally believe or understand that as human beings, we have like sexual urges that I don't think monogamy accommodates. And I have this frame of reference, but I also have this frame of reference because it's all I've ever known from TV, from my own family, from people, which is cheating is bad, it is wrong, it is a destroyer of a relationship, you must leave, you must respect yourself. And I couldn't marry these two things up because I was like, how can I almost expect cheating to kind of be a bit inevitable, but at the same time it be like the worst possible thing that could happen? And actually, through like doing the work that I do, I've read a few books about it. I've come to this place now where I feel like it's not inevitable, but like I understand the like biological reasons why people stray, as well as the like emotional reasons why people stray. It's not inevitable, but for me personally, it's not a deal breaker anymore. And me and my partner have had discussions about like, emotional cheating versus sexual cheating, and like how would we feel about that and things like that. And I do choose monogamy because I think that's the lifestyle I want to lead, and it's important to me to have one other person that I share my life with.
Yeah.
But it's also understanding that humans are completely flawed and sometimes do stupid things or whatever. And so for me personally, it's not a deal breaker. But now I've come to that conclusion, I feel so much better about my relationships because it was this cloud hanging over me that was like, oh my God, if it happens, then the world ends.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, you know what? Life is so much more complicated, and I mean, complicated is probably the best word to describe it. It's so much more complicated than bad and good.
Mm, yeah,
So,
yeah. It's uh, what I always try and um, say in these examples. Like not, it's like it's not 0 and 1. It's like it's not an integer. It's a decimal. So it's like from zero to from 0.01 and then all the way to 0.99, and like there's so much nuance in between
yeah,
that we can't just rely it's going to be either 0 or 1, because like there's
yeah,
so much complexities and things happening in between that we need to kind of not with I don't yeah, and I'm guessing you don't prepare yourself for cheating, but it's like you accept it as
yeah,
the possibility that maybe it can happen someday, and you know that
yeah,
we are just, as you said, like we are completely flawed. And
yeah,
I think because of that, we need to give ourselves grace and other people grace as well.
yeah. And part of that is loss of control. Like, if I accept, not that it's inevitable, but like there's a possibility, just as us breaking up is a possibility, like you realize that you can't put in all of these things to like reduce the chance that cheating might happen or minimize the opportunity for him to not love me anymore. Like, it's not a formula.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of taught, or for our own self-protection, feel like we just want that fix and that answer to know that like this person will love us forever, or we will love them forever. We want a guarantee
Yeah,
because that's
yeah,
safe,
yeah,
but there are no guarantees. And
yeah.
I think if people can get more comfortable with that, then it frees you up to feel like you can be more of yourself because you almost don't have anything to lose by being yourself.
Mm. That one that hits home, and I think it's a wonderful way to conclude our conversation. And I love that we touched upon so many different topics and
Yeah.
areas of expectations in relationships, and even touched upon cheating, which even what's surprising for me, like I almost forgot that's a part of relationships. I was like, oh, there's cheating as well. Like that's something I completely forgot. But I think that only goes to show how safe I feel with my own partner, because my parents also had not one but like multiple affairs. So
Mm,
for me to completely forget that that's also a part of a relationship, by this point
mm,
it's like, I don't feel it. Yeah, I don't feel that cloud over me. Not because
yeah,
necessarily I'm not. It's not that I'm ignoring it, but I think I've kind of almost unconsciously, because of those experiences earlier, I was like, that's something that happened. I can't do anything about it. It's not in my control. So I
yeah,
don't want to stress about it either.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention it, I guess, because when you were talking about having these conversations, I think cheating is something in particular that people don't like. It probably took me a little bit to be able to admit and say, actually, I don't think it's a deal breaker for me, because so many people are like, what? How could you think that? Like, that's
Mm.
not, it's the end of the world, but for various reasons I don't. And I think, yeah, if we need to talk about these things, and then other people can make their own judgment about whether it is or not. And that's completely up to you to decide what your boundaries are.
Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, on the back of this, I encourage everyone new listening to this episode on the podcast to think about, is it a deal breaker for you? And even more importantly, to discuss it with your partners. Who knows what might come up else from that conversation? Because when you start to be vulnerable, it's like it almost it's almost like a Pandora's box, right? because you weren't for so long, and then once you start discussing all of these issues, I think then one comes after the other very, very easily, usually.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much,
exactly.
Rachel.
Thank you. Been lovely to chat to you.
It likewise. And where can people find you? Let us know.
So I'm courageouslyou.co.uk online, courageously you coaching on Instagram, and I have a podcast called Is It Normal, which if you just search in like Spotify or Google, you'll find it. Is It Normal? And I actually have a couple of episodes about where I chatted with three of my friends about what our deal breakers are in relationships. So there's various things there about basically like how do you make sense of your normal in your relationships.
Awesome. I know what I'm listening to this weekend then. Thank you so
Brill. Thanks
much.
so much.
You're welcome. Have a lovely day.
You too. Chat soon. Bye bye.
Bye.